learning how to position yourself when starting or changing directions is key really to your success. Today's panelist comes to you from the sunny-ish archipelago of Bermuda. And speaking to you today, we have Heather Nova, who is an award-winning performer and artist. Apologies, Heather. Abbie Sheppard, the chief of staff at Cameo, and Gina Pereira of Emeritus, where she is the philanthropic fiduciary director. With that, let's jump right into introductions. Heather, can you tell us a little about yourself?
Hi, yeah, my name is Heather Nova, and first of all, I'm thrilled to be here today with so many amazing in this global conference. I'm a singer-songwriter, and I've been in the music industry since the early 90s. I started out in London in the UK, and for the first half of my career, I was on major record labels like Sony, Warner's, Universal. And but in the last 15 years, I decided to go independent as an artist, which meant that I have creative control, which is wonderful. But it also means that I don't have the big machine of a label behind me for marketing and for support. And so I've had to essentially learn to also be a business person, which didn't come as naturally to me as singing and songwriting. So that's been an interesting process for me. I've also published a book of my poetry, and I'm a painter as well.
Awesome, thank you. Abbie, can you tell us a little about yourself as well?
Of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Abbie. Very excited to be here with so many awesome people. I am the Chief of Staff at Cameo. Have been at Cameo coming up on 4 years. Started as an intern nearly 4 years ago. Was based in Chicago. Moved back to London to head up our international side, and then moved into a Chief of Staff role about 9 months ago. If anyone doesn't know what Cameo is, we're the app for if you wanted to book a celebrity to wish your friend happy birthday, you do that through us. For me, I've always wanted to work in the in-between entertainment and tech, so very much focused on the tech world, being a tech startup, but we're really lucky that we get to work with so many people. So it's been an awesome journey. I'm very early on in my career, but have been at a startup that's now a unicorn as of a couple of months ago. So really excited to kind of walk through how I got here and what I've been doing with Gina.
Awesome, thank you, Abbie. And Gina, can you tell us a little about yourself? You are actually on mute.
I tried to take it off. Sorry. Good morning, everyone. So happy to be here and to be amongst these wonderful women to speak about this issue today. My background is in law, and I was in a very traditional trust and estate attorney capacity for many years. And about 2010, I decided to go off on my own, and I created my own consulting firm called Dana Philanthropy. Had a small but great team to support me, and ran that firm for 10 years. Through that time, like Heather said, to be honest with you, when I started my career, nobody was talking about branding explicitly. Maybe there were people in the world that did do that, but it wasn't common parlance amongst my industry, at least. And so when I went out on my own, I was sort of thrown into the deep end and had to sort of figure it out. And like Heather, it wasn't something that came naturally to me. So it was a learning experience. It continues to be a learning experience. And then recently, I decided to partner up with Emeritus in Bermuda. I've been living abroad in many different countries for over 20 years, and I've recently come home to Bermuda. And I'm so thrilled to be back in community and working with a wonderful team, Emeritus.
Thank you, Gina. We're going to jump right into some questions, ladies. We're going to start with Heather. How did you get started with building your brand?
Okay, so when I was starting out as a young singer-songwriter in the early 90s, the word brand was just not on my radar at all. And in fact, I remember the first time someone mentioned it to me, I was going to put one of my paintings on my album cover. And someone said, yeah, but your face is part of your brand. And I kind of went, that's horrible. That sounds so corporate. And that's not what I'm about. I'm an artist. I'm not interested in branding. And I to be honest, I still don't really think in terms of branding. So you might be wondering what I'm doing on this panel, but I do think in terms of identity. And I think that there's something really interesting about how an artist kind of inadvertently builds a brand simply by being authentic and making every single choice that they make being true to themselves. And in doing so, you kind of organically build a brand. I mean, I can look back now and see how I did that without realizing it. My brand was a combination of things. It was my story. It was, of course, the sound of my music and my voice, the style of my songwriting. But there were also visual elements. For instance, at one point, I started duct taping Easter lilies onto my microphone stand when I played live. And I did it because I love them. They represented Bermuda, where I come from, and they smelled good when I sang. And this was just an authentic choice that made sense to me. And that became part of my brand. When people came to my shows, even today, they expect to see the lilies on the mic stand. I had a cello player with me on stage right from the beginning. So even when I was doing acoustic shows or when I was doing full-on rock band shows, there was always a cello. And that became, part of my brand. And so I think that really branding is about authenticity. I think that's the core number one thing that's important. It's being you. I say this to young singer-songwriters just about their career. I say the most important thing you can do is be as you can be, because uniqueness is the thing that stands out. And that's really what matters, whether it's just for you as your career or it's for your brand. You want to be unique. And so you want to do things, you want to make choices that feel absolutely 100% correct to you. And then it's about taking all those elements and kind of distilling them into what all these choices boil down to. And that essentially is your identity or your brand, I guess I would say. But maybe one of you wants to jump in, one of you who are more consciously branding wants to jump in on this, because that's my take on it.
Would anyone like to jump in on that? Abbie?
I think so, that you touched on it really well, Heather. I think something that is that's really important is that authentic piece. I think for a lot of young people starting out or people who are really early in their careers, they're still trying to figure out who they are, right? And that's a very difficult thing to do. I think I have a younger sister, and she's just finished high school, and she's trying to figure out what she's trying to do in life. And I think you don't have to know what you want to do or who you want to be. I think you have to really think about what are your values, right? And what are you trying to accomplish? Whether or not you want to be a doctor, you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to work a 9-to-5 job wherever, that's totally fine. I think the biggest thing to realize is what's really important to you and what values you want to stick by in life, and that will just help you navigate where you want to get to. Because if you come across a job and the culture doesn't fit what your is authentic to yourself, or you are thinking about starting something because there's huge money in it, but it's not something that you agree with, that's going to be really difficult for you to maintain over a long period of time, because it's not something that's true to yourself. So I think that authentic piece, Heather, you're so right, is so important. And if you don't know who you want to be or what you want to do, just understanding what's important to you is really important.
Exactly. And I think it's so easy to be influenced by outside people, and collaboration is great, but I think that you want to be always checking in with that inner voice that we all have, and because I know from being in the music industry, there would be executives who would be saying, "Oh yeah, we want to do this in your video and this," and you just have to return and check back in with that inner voice. Does that feel like me? Does that feel true? And often you have to fight those people off. You know, when they're challenging you as your identity, because only you know that, really.
Absolutely. Thank you, Heather and Abbie. I'm going to jump into our second question, and I'm going to start with Gina. How much time did you invest building your own personal brand, and what was the most effective?
Well, first, I want to say that I think I was misguided in the beginning because I was looking at building more of a corporate brand. I sort of didn't have the sophistication or knowledge to really look at the personal brand identity. But once I started to get into it, the time that I invested varied at different points throughout the process of building a business, and also of personal growth. It could have started very nominally, but then it moved into like a few hours a week. And I think really you got to think about what your objective is. And what I will say about that is I know there's this sort of propensity to like be out there in the social media world and, like get lots of followers, but it's how you connect with people that is going to, I think personally, demonstrate the most success. That was what was most effective for me. And so that may be more time consuming. So if you just click a like, yes, your name pops up, but I don't think that necessarily resonates with people. If you take the time to comment on somebody's post, add something to it, or, actually do old-fashioned networking and interaction and picking up the phone and talking to people, I mean, that to me has always proven to be more successful than just focusing on the metrics of like numbers and likes and just putting yourself out there name-wise. It doesn't distinguish you. It doesn't show your personality. And to what Abbie and Heather were saying before, the importance of being true to yourself, the importance of being authentic, you've got to let your personality come through in this process. And that was a growing point for me, because I was like, well, I've got to stop looking at what I think the market is looking for and really just be true to myself and show that. And the more I embraced that, the more I found that things were organically just flowing. So you can put in a little bit of time, you can put in a lot of time. I think it's important to be consistent. I think that it should be like on a regular basis so that your presence is always out there. But I think what's really important is that it's got to be substance over form. It's got to be quality. So I don't know if others have any thing they want to add to that.
Would anyone else?
I think that's right. It's finding a balance, isn't it? Because really, for me, the branding happens secondary. What's first is the creativity. It's the content. It's what you're about, and then the branding is kind of that's the business part. That's the marketing part, and you come to that as an aftermath of what you've created, obviously. And so I try to keep the balance, high on the creativity, on what I'm doing, and then just a small portion to the I still have a hard time saying branding to the business side of what I do. But I think it's different for every business, every vocation. I think it's really very individual.
Thank you, ladies. I'm going to pop into question number 3 now, which is, can you measure the value of your brand? And if so, how? Heather, would you like to take this one?
Me? Yeah.
Sure. This is, can you measure the value of your brand? And if so, how?
I think there are a few elements to that. And the most obvious one is are people coming back? Are people, is there a trust there between you and your audience or your followers? Do they feel like they know what they're going to get? Each time I go on tour, are people coming back to my shows? Each time I put out a record, is there an interest? And way of measuring it. But I also think, it's kind of going back to what I said before, but does your brand resonate with you, and does it feel right? And what I mean by that is we can create a brand that isn't completely aligned with us. I remember when I was on my third album and I was on a major label, and they really wanted a hit out of this album. And so they were kind of trying to, I don't want to say rebrand, but almost overbrand me, because I was from the islands. They wanted like this picture of me laughing on the cover on an island vibe, and they were putting me with more poppy producers, and none of this was resonating with me. It was feeling wrong, because my music has more depth than that. It's a little more melancholy, but I was under a lot of pressure, and I went along with their marketing plan. And the consequence of that, of not listening to my inner voice, was that I actually lost a lot of followers on that one record, because there was a lack of authenticity. So I guess, and that's always going to be transparent to people. So I guess that I come back to saying the value, you can measure that by measuring how true to yourself you are being, how authentic. And the third thing I think that's important to think about when measuring the value is, do you have the freedom within that identity to evolve? So for instance, a brand shouldn't be so locked in so that like I can't cut my hair if I want, you know what I mean? Or I can't explore a different production style on my music, or, you want to be able to move freely within that brand. I remember when I got pregnant, and my manager said to me, "Oh, your fans aren't going to like that." And I was taken aback. I was like, what do you mean? And he clearly saw me as someone who had a certain type of following, who would be disappointed by me having a baby. And I said, no, you don't get it. My followers, my fans, what they value about me is that I sing about real life. I sing about emotions, and I write about what's real. And this is just going to be the next phase within that. And I'm going to write about what it's like to be a mother, and that's going to be okay. And it was, so you need to have the freedom to evolve and change within your brand. I think that's important.
Thank you, Heather.
Can I jump in there quickly, Nikki? I think the key in measurement is also to know your target audience. Like, who is it that you are trying to connect with? Because I see this, like a lot of metrics out there about generating numbers on social media. I work with a very specific segment of the population, which are private clients, ultra high net worth. They're not going to be following me on LinkedIn. Like that's just not. So you have to know who your audience is when you're looking at measurements, right? And so you've got to look at, well, what are the ways in which that I can see whether my approach is connecting with people. For me, it's being invited to publish, it's being invited to speak, it's professional saying we want to introduce you to this family or to that. So I think what I see a lot of this generic advice around building a brand that may not necessarily be customized to the specific area in which your focus is. And I want people to keep in mind that you've got to really look at know your audience, and that will help you to determine what are the appropriate measurements and metrics to use to see if you're becoming successful in your efforts.
Thank you, Gina. I'm going to move to the next question, ladies. Do you have any? Sorry, actually, I've skipped ahead. How did you create your offline/online network, and how do you keep it active? Abbie, I'd love if you tackled this one.
Sure. I think the biggest thing with that, I think, when going back to talking about being authentic, like when it's much easier for you to be always consistent if you're doing something that's very authentic to you, right? Like not having to put on this show, or, feeling like you're this person that you're not, and to do something that you're not comfortable with. Realizing that like there's always 1 or 2 or 3 degrees of separation. So whether it's like offline, online, offline, there's referrals, people are talking, information can be shared so quickly. And the same thing online, like people are Googleable, and you can go and find out stuff at the drop of a hat. I think maintaining like consistency across the different socials that you're using, or the different people that you're connecting with, is always the easiest way to be. Something that when we're hiring new people, or I'm looking to build out my network with people, one of the first things I'm doing is like looking on their LinkedIn or looking on their socials and seeing the type of person that they are. I think culture and being with people who are like-minded and are in your environment, and the types of people that you want to connect with, is so important. And so people are probably doing that to you too. So having that consistency across the conversations that you're having, and the content that you're putting out there, is really important. I think finding the things that like work for you. So for me, being in tech and at a startup, and having revolving around social influence, like for me, socials is really important. And the person that I am, I don't necessarily put my job all over my socials, but my lifestyle too kind of reflects the person that I am at work. And I think that is very helpful in people understanding who are they working with, or who am I connecting with, but also that people aren't just this person that they are at work. And that's really for at least the people that are in my network and I connect with. Like I don't really see people as having this like I'm at work and then this is my personal life kind of thing. I think it's that having that harmonious integration of both sides is really helpful in creating that consistency across like offline, online interaction. But I think one of the biggest problems is that when you're starting out, or when you are busy or not busy, like you don't always have to be posting content or having conversations that are about you. I think your brand is also how you interact with others and the stuff that they're doing. So if you don't, it's a lot of pressure to feel like you have to post stuff on socials all the time and give updates about what's going on in your life and what you did at the weekend and what you're working on right now. And that can be really difficult for people. I think celebrating others' success, or learning from others' losses, or asking questions, and how you interact with people is as much your brand as it is you distributing all of the stuff that you're doing. And realizing that, I think, is like really key as you're trying to build up your brand, before you have a lot to share. Like how you interact with others and what they're doing is as much like part of your brand as when you have your own things going on, I would say.
I love that. Thank you. I'm going to move to the next question, ladies. Do you have any tips on how to reinvent your personal brand as you grow?
I'm going to apologize. There's a bit of banging in the background. I hope it's not too loud. I'm going to draw back to the original point that Heather raised, and Abbie has also commented on the importance of consistency and authenticity, but not at the price of stifling development. We are humans, right? We evolve. When I was 20 years old, I'm not the same person today. I think differently than I did 10 years ago. If I read something that I published 10 years ago, I may say, I don't actually agree with that now. And so we have to, Heather alluded to this, we have to allow that process to evolve as we mature, as we grow into our own selves, as we celebrate ourselves and feel more confident and just evolve as human beings. Then you're going to naturally reinvent your brand. I think if you stay with the authenticity, it's going to naturally follow that it moves in the direction that you're growing and moving into. But the key is really just to be true to yourself. And I just want to say that's like, I can't emphasize how important that is, because I feel that we're always being told what is appropriate and how to do it. And it doesn't matter what industry you're in. Like if it's not going to resonate with your audience if you're trying to project something that you think that they want versus what is true to yourself. And I know we're kind of banging on that drum a little bit, but in terms of tips, I don't have anything to say other than I don't think reinvention is even the right word. I think it's evolution. It's evolution as individuals and personally, evolution in our careers. And then the brand is going to just develop in organically as a result of that. I'm going to turn my mic off now and see if anyone else wants to add to that.
No, but I love what both you and Abbie are saying about how it's also not just about us and our brand, it's about going out there and interacting. And I think that with all the social media, it's important to show, to be transparent about our evolution, and not try to be this perfect thing, because that I think alienates others more than anything. It's important to show that there is growth, and there is we make mistakes, and that's part of who we are, and that can actually be a wonderful part of our identity.
Thank you for that, ladies. One of our final questions before we go to the audience is, what is your number one piece of advice to the next generation of female leaders when it comes to brand building?
I'll take a stab at the first part of this. I think it's really important, and something that I lived by was not following this system, right? We live in such a system of society. And, when I was at school, it was very much you go to school, you go to university. If you do anything other than that, it's outside of what you're supposed to be doing. And, you're supposed to interact and follow the processes that have been built out for you. And that's just a subject of society. And I think it's really difficult to really find what truly makes you happy and, you truly want to do if you're just going through the same motions as everyone else. But it's very daunting to step outside of that. And, unless I was very lucky that I had, parents who kind of instilled that in me from a really young age of, going out there and be bold and, don't be afraid to push down barriers that, society has set up for you. And so that's something that, when I was looking to start out my career, I took a gap year in between school, and then I actually left university to, join Cameo and have, been here ever since. And that's worked for me. Some people, if you want to be a doctor, you've got to go through that system. That's what the system is designed for. But I think, understanding that there's more than, what society is putting in front of you is really important. And really don't be afraid to go out there and, experiment and find the things that you want to do and interact with a bunch of different people. It's kind of like relationships, both friendships and, partners that you're with. It's important to, meet a ton of people and see the people who you vibe with, the people that, you're gonna resonate with the most, and people who can be, impactful to you, and you can be impactful to them. And I think sometimes that it's really difficult to learn how to step outside of those barriers, but just not being afraid to push stuff down, because like Gina and Heather said, if you screw it up, you screw it up, right? And that's fine. And it's as much a good learning curve as anything else. But just being able to, have that firepower behind you, that, you're on a mission and you want to experiment with life and do things. I think that's really important. Which I think a lot of young people just don't have enough guidance on with the system that's been set up for them.
Jump in just quickly on and Abbie inspired a couple of to me. And also Heather, drawing on Heather's point, about messing up, and this process is going to succeed if you are prepared to be vulnerable, and that means putting yourself out there. It means speaking against the grain sometimes, and And I've done that a lot throughout my career and felt very alone in that, because it ran contrary to the mainstream. And I kept banging on that drum, but it was scary, and I certainly didn't have confidence around it. But I think that it's the best thing I ever did. It's the vulnerability is just part of the process, and being okay with falling on your behind sometimes and losing face, just getting back up, and being not feeling this pressure to be perfect all the time, as you know, my colleagues have said here. But really, I think vulnerability is a really key component to success in this area.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I learned that really early on in my career when with my first album, I wrote some songs that were very vulnerable and raw. I wrote about being in an abusive relationship, and it was a big, big leap for me to write about this, which was something I'd never spoken about, and it felt scary. But what I discovered was that when you share your vulnerability, when you share your real story, that's when you make connection with people. That's when you actually give people the freedom to come to share their own story, and it's kind of this beautiful cycle. And so I love what you're saying about vulnerability. It's so true, and it feels scary, but in the end, it's what sets you free, and it sets others free too when you share that.
Thank you very much, ladies. I would love to jump into some of the questions from the audience, some of which came in about 30 minutes ago, so they may have already been answered. But that's fine. This was the designated time for Q&A. So if they've already been answered, maybe you can just summarize some of the answers. Okay, so some of them have been very specific to who they want an answer from. And so I will just start with you, Heather. You mentioned choosing creative control over other things. How important do you feel was that decision in terms of maintaining your brand?
I feel it was absolutely key. I didn't want to be in those executive offices anymore where there was someone in a suit telling me what they thought I should put in my video, and how to get in the charts by recording with a certain producer. I just wanted to make the music that felt right to me, and I knew there would be trade-offs, there would be payoffs for that. I wouldn't be getting big advances. I wouldn't be having that kind of backing, but for me as an artist, it was absolutely essential to go that route, and I've never looked back.
Okay. For Abbie, Cameo is such a different concept. Can you elaborate more on what the process of branding was for something so exciting and new?
So as we've grown, something that has always stayed the same from the very beginning is culture. Like, we hire for people who are, culture fits and can be value add to the culture, not necessarily on the culture that, we created 4 years ago, but people who can, add to that and bring value. Cameo is like centered around these personalized and authentic, experiences. And for us, building that and building the talent network that we have and building the fan network that we have, like, instilling that also within our relationships with our fans and our relationships with our talent has been something that has been so key as we've grown. I think being true to the roots that you came from. It's the same with building a company brand. It's the same as building your personal one. It's like where you came from is sometimes you have to pivot, and as you grow, things change, and you can't to incorporate every part of your culture. But having those values is really important. Cameo centers around the social media industry. So for us, like, being out there and sharing content, our whole company is just content. And that's really important for us to be sharing that with everyone else. One of our biggest values is transparency. So not only are we transparent internally, leadership meetings are shared with our team, and every conversation that I have across my whole team is consistent and transparent. And it's the same thing on the outside. We're transparent with our talent, we're transparent with our fans and our customers, and that's something that I think Gina and Heather mentioned on it, having being vulnerable as a company, startups will mess up, and it happens, and things go wrong, and things will go wrong in your career when you're building out your brand, but being able to learn from that and rectify it and move forward. I think people really respect that, and building that trust and respect is something that has been really key for us as we've grown, and really key for me too within Cameo. Getting to where I am now, having started as an intern, it's that like trust and consistency over time, and that's the same thing that we've built with our talent and our fans. And I think that's something that when you're starting out is really important. I don't know if that answers the question, but I think it does.
It does. Thank you, Abbie. Gina, I have one question for you as well. We actually have a bunch of questions in here, ladies. We may not be able to get to all of them as our time is wrapping up in about 5 minutes. But Gina, this question is for you. Thank you, Gina, for your elaboration that a brand needs to develop organically. I think so too. But how do you manage the gap between hesitation and let it grow and give it time?
The gap between hesitation and let it grow and give it time.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm clear on the question.
How do you manage the gap between the hesitation of wanting it to not being able to act, and the fact that you need to, the fact that you have to give it some time to grow?
Is it a patience question? Is that
Yeah.
is that really it?
It feels like that.
Well, I think that's the case with life, right? Like, I think that we have certain objectives and goals in life, and sometimes they flow naturally. They're going to flow on their own course. But my experience is that when you force things to happen, when you're sort of like the salmon's swimming upstream constantly, then that's a friction that I don't find serves the objective well. Like in my life, things that have evolved and flowed successfully and are the ones that have done it naturally, like where I'm in line with it, where energetically it's just, it's there. So when I talk about organic, like, I think putting timelines on it is, you may find yourself, being let down because it may not happen within the time frame that you're looking for, or it may happen differently within that time frame. Like, this is the thing about control. Like, can we really anticipate where things are going to go and where we want it to be? Like, if you're going to surrender to the organic process, you've got to allow it to sort of take shape in the way that it does, as long as it resonates with you. Coming back to what Heather said at the outset, like, how does this vibe with me? Like, oh, I didn't think about this idea never came to me before. Is this right for me? Does it vibe for me? And so I think if I understand the question correctly, like, there may be a friction in terms of wanting to achieve a certain objective within a specific time frame, but in order to honor the organic process, I think you just got to keep plugging away and be committed to it and see where it unfolds. I don't know if my other co-panelists might want to jump in there if I haven't hit on the issues.
I actually have one more question that I would like each of you to tackle in our last 4 minutes. Before we tap out of that. Creativity is a ubiquitous concept in the creative industries, but it's something that everybody defines differently, which brings me to my question: what does creativity represent for each of you? That was a question from the audience.
I personally would say creativity for me is actually a way of processing life itself, whether it's the relationships in my life or whether it's the way I see a beautiful, bit of nature. It's just the way that I distill and process experience, and it's something that I'm driven to do. It makes me feel good to create. It makes me feel alive, and it makes me feel connected to the world when I create and I share that with other people.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to tap in on that?
I think for me, probably it's the concept really pushing the boundaries and growing. For like something that I've always thought is, you know, if it doesn't challenge me, it won't change me, and it doesn't help me grow. And, you know, finding these outlets, Heather really touched on it, you know, that the outlets that you can, you know, process and experiment with, not just in like, I think creative sometimes is, you know, literally what can you see and do that's cool and exciting. And I think just things that, you know, step you outside of what you're doing currently, and you know, push you in different directions and help you experiment with all different things in your life is probably what I would see as side of creativity.
Gina, would you add to that?
I'm going to be quick, but the key for me is openness and creating the space for things to flow. I read once that the most successful people in the world create time for creativity is the top of their day. So they wake up, and then the first thing they do is they allocate a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour to just a creative project so that they're not in a reactive state. And so openness and really, you know, just allowing for things to come through, and whatever you have to do for yourself to put yourself in that state of openness so that you can receive, so that ideas and thoughts can flow through you, and that you carve out that time every day to allow that process to develop.
That's a really great point, Gina. And I just want to add something really quick, and that is that openness, for me, I would recommend everyone go for a walk. That's when the openness happens for me. It works. Creativity comes.
Not listening to podcasts or music. Well, maybe music.
Not necessarily sitting at a desk hoping for ideas to come is what I'm saying. You know, you get out and you walk, and your mind starts to open and things start to flow.
And just stepping outside and taking a sense of reflection, I think Absolutely. Is like really important. And also probably like allowing people to help you reflect, right? I think sometimes like we're on this mission of I have to do everything myself. And that's something that I've definitely learned over the last 3 years, is like people can be really helpful in like helping you be as creative. You don't have to do everything by yourself. Like having, you know, other insights help you build that. So I like love that. I should probably go for a walk today.
At 11:05, so we are probably about to end any second now, but thank you so much to our speakers, and thank you for joining us today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.